This video is chapter 11.1, part 1. We'll look at independent samples versus dependent samples. So in chapter 11.1, we're going to make inferences about two population proportions. Make sure you have your note sheets out. And then the first set of notes you would put is this idea of a sampling method. And so in this section, we're doing independent sampling of two proportions. And so we just have to kind of distinguish between the term independent and dependent, which we've had variables. Now we're talking about independent, dependent sampling. A sampling method is independent when the individuals selected for one sample do not dictate which individuals are to be in the second. So when you choose, we're going to compare two samples and you choose them. How you choose them, they're not dependent on each other. And of course, a dependent is when the individuals selected to be in one sample are used to determine the individuals in the second sample. And so there is no relationship between those two samples. In the example we did earlier in the introduction, it had to do with the presidents and its opponent. That was a matched pair. Those were dependent samples versus just two separate groups of people you're comparing. Who was in this group doesn't matter per se. And so in this case, on a dependent, it's possible for individuals to be matched against him or herself. So sometimes matched pairs are the same person, which we'll talk about in 11.2. Let's go ahead and look at those examples. So looking at the examples from your note sheets, we have the situation here. Researcher wants to know whether the price for a one-night stay at a Holiday Inn is less than the price of a one-night stay at a Red Roof Inn at different cities. So she randomly selects 8 towns where the location of the hotels are close to each other and determines the price of one night. So is this an independent or dependent? And then the second one, the researcher wants to know if the state quarters introduced in 1999 have a mean weight that is different from the traditional quarters. And so we're comparing the state quarters versus the traditional quarters. So think about that real quick. Here's your answer. So in each of those cases, what do we know? The first method, the sampling method, is dependent. And then the second one, it's independent since the state quarters were sampled. Had no bearing on the traditional. There's no relationship between the state and traditional, where in the hotel example, they are related. We're actually comparing the prices of the one hotel from a city against another hotel from a city. And so in those cases, the first one would be dependent, and then this is independent. We have those two. That's the type of sampling: independent sampling and independent sampling. And remember, dependent sampling are called matched pairs. And again, that's because we're actually matching up. We have the 8 cities, and you're actually matching up hotels in there. So that's the independent, dependent. So go ahead and try this one on your own real quick. You have your answer. You're trying this. Is this an independent or dependent sampling method? Do women tend to select a spouse who has a higher IQ than their own? To answer this question, researchers randomly selected 20 women and their husbands. They measured the IQ of each wife-husband team to determine whether there was a significant difference in IQ. This would be dependent sampling because the wife and husband are matched pairs. And so this is what you should have had, matched pairs. Okay. There's a nice note on the bottom, and so we would use the matched pair design hypothesis test for that. Something just to be aware of real quick is this idea here. Determine whether individuals in one group were used to determine the individuals in another group. So an approach to thinking about it, if the sampling method is dependent, if so, the sampling method is dependent, meaning do we select one group based on another group? If not, then that's an independent sampling. So like how we selected the husbands depends on the wife or vice versa. And then if the response variables in the study is qualitative with 2 outcomes, more than likely it's a proportion test. because you're asking, did you do this? Yes or no? Is it true or false? Success or failure? And then quantitative is going to be a means. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's the first part of chapter 11.1.